Welcome to Debt Matters.
Today, we're going to get into that moment every business owner loves, right? Bringing on a new client.
Absolutely. It's always a good feeling.
It is, but, that joy can often mask what is probably the single greatest financial risk a company faces.
And that's what this is all about. We're focusing on how you can proactively shield your cash flow.
And specifically by perfecting the process before you even make that first sale.
That really is the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole premise here is that bad debt, the money you just know you're never going to get back, it's rarely some sudden unavoidable thing.
Right.
It's almost always a direct result of skipping steps during that initial client onboarding period.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is isolate and really examine the three foundational defenses.
And if you build these correctly, they can dramatically minimize your risk of default.
We're going to break down these critical upfront procedures that, they move a client relationship from a high-risk guess to a managed expectation.
Okay, so what are they?
So first, know your customer, or KYC. Then, having really robust contractual agreements. And finally, the strategic, data-driven use of credit limits.
Get that trifecta right, and you're in a completely different position.
You transform your financial risk profile immediately.
So our mission today is to break these three down in detail. We're not just, defining terms.
No, not at all.
We're going to show you how they combine to create this airtight framework that protects your working capital.
The goal is for you to walk away knowing exactly what due diligence needs to be formalized and, just as important, enforced.
Right. To reduce your financial exposure before the first product even ships or the first hour of service is billed.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If you ask, say, a typical accounts receivable manager about bad debt, their mind immediately goes to the collection cycle. Calling clients who are 30 days past due, hiring agencies, maybe sending a stern letter from a lawyer.
They see it as a collection problem, as in, we failed to get the money back. And that's precisely where the perspective has to shift. The argument is really clear here. Chasing bad debt is like fighting a battle that you probably already lost.
When?
The day you sign the client. Bad debt, which is money owed that is almost certainly not coming back, is most effectively handled through prevention.
So if you onboard a client who was, let's say, financially unstable from the start, or they weren't willing to agree to fair terms.
Or you couldn't even legally verify who they were.
Right. Even if they pay that first invoice, you haven't really secured a client. You've accepted a financial liability.
You've baked the risk right into the relationship. That's a perfect way to put it.
You've set a time bomb, basically.
Absolutely. Think of it like a leak in a dam. You can spend all your time and energy trying to scoop out the water that's pouring through, or you can go back to the source and fix the crack in the foundation. The real failure is upstream.
So when you give credit to an unknown entity, you're essentially just making an unsecured loan.
You are. And it's based on nothing more than the hope that they'll pay you. And, sustainable businesses just can't operate on hope.
And the cost of that initial mistake. It's so much more than just the invoice amount itself.
Yeah.
People get too focused on that one number.
Oh, way more. Let's broaden this out because that's where the concept of the true cost of bad debt comes in. It goes so far beyond the principal loss.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
Well, the financial impact is deep. First, you have all these hidden costs just related to operational friction and waste.
Give me a breakdown of that. I'm guessing it's more than just a few phone calls.
Oh, it's a massive drain on your whole organization's efficiency. Think about your accounts receivable team, your AR team.
Okay.
If they're spending, say, 80% of their time chasing the 20% of clients who don't pay.
That's time they're not spending on the good clients.
Exactly. They're not managing payments from your reliable customers. They're not forecasting cash flow accurately. They're not doing any other profitable administrative work. Every single hour spent on a debt that's destined to default is an hour of salary just wasted.
And then it escalates, right? It's not just the AR team anymore.
It always escalates. Pretty soon, managers are getting pulled into strategy meetings about these non-payers. Legal has to get involved to draft demand letters or review contracts.
All of which costs more money.
And it reduces your internal capacity. It even contributes to employee burnout. Who wants to constantly work against a tide of failure that was introduced way back in the sales cycle?
And the most critical part of all of this, of course, is the impact on cash flow.
The cash flow impact is immediate and it's devastating. Let's say you're operating on a typical margin, maybe 10%.
Right.
And you lose a $10,000 invoice to bad debt. You haven't just lost $10,000.
Lame game.
To recover that $10,000 in profit, you have to generate $100,000 in new sales.
Wow. That really puts it in perspective. The scale of replacement revenue you need is 10 times the loss.
And while that debt is sitting there unpaid, you've used your own cash, your working capital, to cover all the expenses for that product or service.
So you're out the money for supplies, for labor, for everything.
And that loss of liquidity, it hamstrings you. It restricts your ability to invest in new inventory or hire people or jump on growth opportunities. It can even force you to take on expensive loans, which introduces a whole new set of costs.
So this contrast between a proactive and a reactive approach, it's not just a strategy, it's a core philosophy.
It has to be.
Reactive is waiting for that 60-day overdue notice and just hoping the collections team can pull off a miracle.
While proactive means viewing client onboarding as the critical risk assessment and mitigation stage.
This is where you stop the problem before it starts.
That proactive stage is all about gathering leverage and establishing control from day one. When you do thorough due diligence, when you establish a protective contract, you are literally gathering the legal and financial tools you'll need for enforcement later.
You're negotiating from a position of strength.
Right. But if you skip those steps and a default happens, you are reacting from a position of weakness. You're scrambling to find leverage that you should have secured months ago.
This really shifts the goal then. It's not about accepting any business that comes your way. It's about accepting good business.
Business that actually aligns with your financial risk tolerance.
Right.
The goal of prevention is, well, it's multifaceted. Of course, it's vital to catch the outright fraudsters or the super high-risk clients.
Sure.
But it's just as important to build relationships that are based on transparency and on validated information. You want to make sure the client has the history, the financial capability to meet the expectations you've both agreed on.
If you skip that work up front, you're just extending credit blindly.
And that is just fundamentally not a sustainable way to run a business.
So you're moving from a question mark, will they pay, to a statement of fact, they have a track record of paying. They're legally bound by our terms, and we've capped our exposure to a manageable level.
That structural change is what we are building with these 3 pillars.
Okay, let's move to pillar 1. Before any service happens, any product ships, we need absolute clarity on who the client actually is. This is the heart of Know Your Customer, or KYC. For a lot of people, I think KYC feels like this, burdensome compliance paperwork.
It can feel that way, but it is, in fact, the essential first layer of your financial protection.
It's all about protection.
Entirely. The very first stage of KYC is dedicated to the verification of the client's legal structure and their identity. And this isn't just about filing away some forms. It's about defining the legal boundaries of your potential loss.
Okay, let's get specific. Why does the client's legal structure matter so much? If I'm selling, say, software as a service, why should I care if my client is an LLC or a corporation or just a sole proprietorship?
This is fundamental because it directly determines liability if they don't pay you. And that, in turn, guides your entire collection strategy.
How so?
Well, if you're dealing with a larger established corporation, an Inc., let's say, that is a legally separate entity from its owners.
Right, the corporate veil.
Exactly. So if that company defaults, your legal recourse is generally limited to the assets of the company itself. You usually can't go after the owner's personal house or their bank accounts.
But if they're a sole trader?
Then the owner is the business. Their personal assets are technically in play, though, collecting against personal assets is legally very complicated. The point is, you need to know the structure up front to understand the depth of the risk you're taking on.
So I need to get official documentation, a certificate of incorporation or something.
Business licenses, tax ID numbers like an EIN in the U.S., you need that proof.
And getting that detail right means if the debt does go bad, my legal team is targeting the correct, legally validated entity. No procedural mistakes.
Precisely. If you accidentally sue the wrong corporate name, which happens, the case just gets thrown out. And the clock keeps ticking on your ability to recover the money. That simple clerical error, which is totally avoidable with good KYC, can turn a recoverable debt into a complete write-off.
Okay, so beyond the corporate shell, we need to know the people who are actually running it. This is the second part, right? Validating the identity of key personnel.
Stressing the importance of this cannot be overstated. You have to validate the crucial individuals, owners, directors, and especially the authorized signatories. This is your #1 defense against identity fraud.
So people will just pretend to be someone they're not to get a contract.
We've seen cases where someone falsely claims to be a CFO or a director, signs a huge contract, and then just disappears. That contract might be legally unenforceable because the person who signed it had no legal authority to bind the company.
So I need to verify that the person signing the contract is, in fact, the one legally allowed to commit the company to financial obligations.
You need proof. Proof of identity, confirmation that they hold that position within the verified legal structure, and this is key confirmation that their position carries signing authority.
For example.
Well, they might be purchasing manager, but maybe the company policy says only directors can sign contracts over a certain dollar amount. If that's the case, your contract is worthless.
Getting this detail right ensures that if you do have to go to collections, you have an airtight agreement signed by the right person.
It all holds up in court.
So once identity is logged down, we move to the track record. Credit history checks. You're saying this has to be a mandatory, non-negotiable part of onboarding for anyone extending credit.
Well, even net 30 terms are an extension of credit. You are giving them your product or service before they give you cash. If a potential client balks at a simple credit check, that is your first and loudest warning sign.
You need hard data, not just promises. What's the predictive value here, though? How is past financial performance the best indicator of future payment habits?
Because credit reports give you a necessary, non-emotional assessment of risk. They reveal patterns of behavior. Specifically, you look at their trade lines.
What does that show me?
You can see exactly how quickly they pay their existing suppliers. Do they always pay on net 30 terms, or are they reliably 45 or 60 days late? Are there any outstanding judgments against them, or tax liens, or recent bankruptcies?
That history tells you what to expect.
If they pay everyone else late, they are going to pay you late. It's that simple.
It effectively removes the salesperson's optimism from the financial decision. The numbers just speak for themselves.
And this objective data is essential for the next pillar we'll get to, which is determining the right amount of credit to give them.
But, external credit checks aren't always enough, are they? Especially for smaller, newer companies that might not have a deep commercial credit file.
That's a great point. And that's where using trade references comes in.
What are those exactly?
This is critical for painting a full qualitative picture. A trade reference is simply the practice of asking for and checking references from other suppliers that this potential client has worked with. You're basically calling up your peers and asking, so how reliable were they really?
Okay, it seems easy to just get a list of friendly suppliers who will give a glowing but maybe useless reference. How do you actually analyze this input and vet the references themselves?
You have to probe with specific quantitative questions. You have to filter out the fluff. Don't just ask, did they pay on time?
So what should I be asking?
You should ask, number one, what were their standard payment terms with you? Number two, on average, how many days past the due date did they usually pay?
Okay, that's a good one.
Number three, what was the highest amount of credit you ever extended to them? And number four, how long have you had a continuous active trading relationship with them?
Asking for the highest extended credit amount is brilliant. That gives you a real benchmark for their established capacity in the market.
It provides critical context. If all their current suppliers only trust them with, say, $5,000 in credit, it's totally irrational for you to suddenly offer them $50,000.
The quality of the reference is all about the specifics.
Absolutely. If a reference is vague or just offers generalities like, oh yeah, they're great, you have to discount its value a lot.
What if the reference is non-committal? They confirm they do business, but then they say, we prefer not to discuss their payment habits.
That should raise an immediate bright red flag. In the world of commercial credit, a non-committal reference often implies there are problems they don't want to state explicitly, maybe for legal reasons, or just not wanting to burn a bridge.
So what do I do then?
You adjust the risk profile downwards immediately. If 3 of their other suppliers won't vouch for their reliability and specifics, you should significantly restrict their initial credit limit, or even demand cash on delivery until your business has a positive payment history with them directly.
So KYC is like assembling a risk mosaic. And if one tile is missing or cloudy, you have to compensate for that blind spot.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, so we've done our due diligence. We know who the client is, their legal structure, their financial history. Now we have to establish the legally binding rules of the game. This is where the contract moves from just a simple agreement to a protective legal framework.
The contract is your safety barrier. Every single clause should be designed to either prevent non-payment or provide the fastest, most cost-effective remedy when non-payment does happen.
And the first place where you need absolute precision is in the payment terms.
Yes.
This sounds so basic, but so many businesses use vague language like payment is expected upon completion of work. What does expected even mean? What's completion?
That ambiguity is a silent killer of your cash flow. The contract must specify payment terms without any room for misinterpretation at all. We have to avoid vague phrases like payment due shortly after receipt of goods,
Because the client gets to define shortly.
however they want.
So let's use concrete examples. If someone listening is writing their contracts right now, what specific terms should they be using?
You have to use clearly defined industry standard terms. Net 30 means payment is due exactly 30 calendar days from the invoice date. Net 60 means 60 days.
And if you need cash right away?
Then you specify due upon receipt, or DUR, or even cash on delivery, COD.
And you mentioned a critical detail earlier, defining the start date.
Absolutely essential. The contract must clearly link that payment timeline to an objective defined event. Is the 30-day clock starting on the invoice date, or the date the goods arrived at their loading dock, or the date they formally accepted the service?
I just pass.
The invoice date is usually the cleanest and least debatable, but whatever you choose, you have to be explicit. A lack of clarity there is the easiest loophole for a delinquent client to exploit when you try to enforce late fees.
So once that clarity is locked in, we need to enforce compliance with late payment penalties.
Yes, and these are critical because they serve two distinct purposes. They act as a deterrent and as compensation.
Okay, explain the deterrent part.
As a deterrent, the client knows that breaking the terms will have an immediate, quantifiable cost. It makes it financially unwise to treat you like a free, short-term bank.
So if they're deciding who to pay first this month,
The supplier with clear accumulating penalties is going to move way up their priority list.
and the compensation aspect.
This is your legal basis to cover your own costs. When a client pays late, you incur damages, the admin time chasing them, the lost opportunity cost of that capital. The penalty, which is usually accrued interest, compensates you for that damage.
And if it's not in the contract?
You may forfeit your right to claim any of those additional charges later on.
So the contract has to detail the specific nature of these penalties.
It does. You need to specify the exact interest rate that starts accruing the moment the deadline is passed, or detail fixed late fees that are applied at set intervals, like a flat fee at 15 days past due and another at 45.
Are there any rules around that?
You have to make sure the rates comply with local usury laws for commercial transactions. The penalties need to be enforceable, but also realistic. If the penalty is ridiculously high, a court might just throw the whole clause out, leaving you with no leverage at all.
So a good contract anticipates conflict. It's not just about setting rules for when things are good.
Right. It's about defining the legal escape route for when things go wrong. And that means defining dispute resolution.
A well-written contract is a roadmap for conflict management.
It has to predetermine a mechanism for resolving disputes, which can help you avoid those costly, drawn-out legal battles.
We hear terms like mediation and arbitration. For our listener, what's the practical difference, and why should the contract mandate one?
It's a critical distinction. Mediation is a non-binding process. A neutral third party helps the two sides try to reach an agreement. It's cheap, it's fast, and it can often preserve the business relationship.
But it's non-binding.
Right. The mediator has no power to impose a decision. Binding arbitration, on the other hand, is a formal legal proceeding outside of court where an arbitrator hears the evidence and imposes a legally binding decision.
So arbitration is faster and less formal than going to court, but the decision is final.
Exactly. For bad debt cases, arbitration is often preferred because it avoids the years of delay and massive legal fees that come with litigation.
And the contract needs to specify which method you'll use.
And crucially, it must also specify the governing law and the legal venue.
Why is the venue selection so important?
Because it controls the geography of the fight. If your business is in New York and your client is in California, without a venue clause, they could try to drag you into California courts to make the collection process prohibitively expensive for you.
So you put a clause in saying what?
Any disputes arising under this contract shall be governed by the laws of the state of New York and adjudicated in the courts of New York County. That prevents the client from using distance as a defense tactic. It keeps control in your court, literally.
And finally, protecting the relationship through clear termination clauses.
This is paramount. You have to define clear conditions under which the contract can be terminated, especially conditions tied directly to financial failure. You have to define what counts as a default that allows you to walk away.
So if the client misses 3 payments in a row, or they go over their credit limit without permission.
The contract should spell out the immediate consequences. It should include a mandatory curing period, a short, defined window, say 7 days, for the client to fix the breach.
And if they don't?
Then the contract is automatically terminated and all outstanding invoices become immediately due. Clauses dealing with insolvency or bankruptcy are also vital. Your contract needs to give you the ability to stop services immediately when you get that notification to minimize your future exposure.
This all sounds like a pretty heavy lift for a small business. Can they just use a standard template?
Templates are a starting point, but given that state and national laws govern all of this, interest rates, collections, arbitration, a professional legal review is mandatory. Your contract is not a sales tool. It is a financial defense asset.
So that investment up front will pay for itself.
Investing a little bit to customize those key clauses, payment terms, penalties, dispute resolution, will save you exponentially more the first time a default occurs.
Okay, so we've verified the identity, we've locked down the legal rules of engagement. Now we get to the financial safety switch. This is where credit limits come in to actively manage and control your financial exposure right from day one.
And this step is what transitions the relationship from, a legal hope to a controlled financial transaction. The strategic role of credit limits is to define a deliberate, measurable ceiling on your risk.
To make sure no single client's failure can take down your whole business.
Exactly.
And this ceiling, it's not an arbitrary number. It's directly proportional to the client's verified reliability, which we figured out back in the KYC phase.
That direct connection is so important. A credit limit is not a number you pick because it sounds good. It's a calculated boundary. It's the maximum dollar amount you're willing to have outstanding with that client at any given time. It's a shield for your working capital.
How do we calculate this limit then? It's anchored in the data, but what's the formula?
It has to be quantitative. The calculation should really consider 3 things. 1, the client's historical financial capacity. What credit limits have others safely given them?
Which you get from the trade references and credit scores.
Right. 2, their expected order volume, so the limit is actually practical for them. And 3, and this is the one people often overlook, your own business's tolerance for loss.
That's a great point. You might have a client who can handle $100,000 in credit, but if your company can only afford to lose $20,000 without hitting a major crisis, your limit has to be capped at $20,000.
Regardless of how stellar the client's history is, precisely. You integrate these factors into a simple internal risk score. If their score is high, great credit, verified identity, solid references, the limit might be higher.
And if the score is low?
New company, poor references, complex structure, the limit has to be drastically lower. The limit acts as a way to scale risk responsibly.
So that if the worst happens, the loss is manageable and predictable.
And it's already been factored into your annual risk budget.
Okay, let's talk about the practical side of this. The implementation of incremental credit limits. This can feel counterintuitive for the sales team. They want the business, but we're starting by restricting the money.
It's risk management 101. You have to start conservative. This is standard practice for any new or unproven client, even if their credit reports look decent but not exceptional.
So you set a low, conservative initial limit.
Right. Maybe enough for a single month's average order. That minimizes your initial exposure while forcing you to gather direct, first-hand evidence of how they pay you. It's basically a trial period.
So this introduces the concept that increased credit has to be earned over time. Trust isn't just granted, it has to be demonstrated.
It's behavioral conditioning, really. A client demonstrates their reliability by consistently meeting payment obligations under that initial, smaller limit for, say, 6 to 12 months.
And if they always pay on time.
Then their payment history with your business, which is the single most valuable piece of data you can have, improves their internal risk profile. And that provides the concrete, data-driven justification to responsibly increase their limit later.
So finance keeps tight control, but the process doesn't totally stifle sales. You get the business, but you manage the exposure.
And you allow for scalable growth only once the client proves they're trustworthy.
And that leads right into the need for monitoring and adaptation.
It does, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, credit limits cannot be static figures. Setting a limit and just forgetting about it is almost as dangerous as not setting one at all.
Financial distress doesn't just happen overnight.
No, it doesn't.
So what does an active monitoring system look like?
Businesses have to continuously monitor two things: the client's actual payment performance against their terms and their utilization of the credit limit. You need systems that automatically flag clients who are getting close to their limit, or those who consistently start to push their payment deadlines from 30 days to 45 and then to 60.
That delayed payment time is a classic early warning sign of financial trouble, isn't it? They're using their suppliers as a bank.
Absolutely. So the importance of a formal periodic review process can't be overstated. You should schedule mandatory reviews every 6 or 12 months, but the operational monitoring needs to be continuous, running right off your aging reports.
What happens during that periodic review?
This review lets you responsibly increase limits for your good payers, which fosters growth and shows them you appreciate their business. But more importantly, it lets you swiftly reduce limits or even freeze services for those who start exhibiting unreliable payment patterns. The limit acts as a crucial behavioral lever.
How do you communicate a reduction or a freeze without completely damaging the relationship?
It has to be communicated as a data-driven consequence of their recent actions, not as some punitive measure.
So you frame it how?
You explain that their payment behavior over the last quarter, paying 45 days late instead of 30, has automatically adjusted their internal risk score, and that requires a reduction in their available credit until they can demonstrate adherence to the terms once more.
So it puts the responsibility for the restriction back on the client.
Exactly.
The synergy here is completely clear now. KYC provides the data for the initial limit, the contract provides the legal framework for enforcement, and the credit limit provides the continuous financial control and safety net throughout the whole relationship.
It's a closed-loop system of risk reduction.
And when you implement this kind of structure, your finance department goes from being a reactionary collection center to a proactive risk management partner for the sales team.
And that fundamental shift in approach is what drives long-term financial stability.
So we've analyzed how minimizing bad debt really hinges on aligning these three essential onboarding components.
Verifying identity and history through KYC.
Establishing clear legal boundaries with robust contracts.
And setting financial exposure controls through credit limits.
It's a comprehensive defense strategy, and it's built on information, clarity, and, I think most importantly, control.
This entire framework, it's designed to eliminate hoping a client pays. Instead, you ensure the groundwork is laid for them to pay reliably.
And if they don't,
And if they breach that agreement, you already have the legal and financial tools you need to act decisively and minimize your loss. It transforms the initial transaction from an emotional risk into a thoroughly calculated one.
So if you are managing cash flow, this is where you have to focus your resources. The time and the expense you spend up front, vetting the client, writing that watertight contract, setting the right limit, it's always dwarfed by the massive cost of chasing a bad debt after the fact.
Now, for a final thought for you to consider. Think about the internal tension points in your own business acquisition process. If your sales team is incentivized solely by high volume and the speed of signing new clients, how does that metric fundamentally conflict with the finance team's need for low risk and thorough vetting?
What specific mechanisms must you implement to strike that delicate but necessary balance between swift client acquisition and long-term financial stability to truly protect your bottom line?
We encourage you to explore that tension within your own organization.